Welcome into Thursday's edition of a new show. That's Greg Barnes. I'm Tommy Ashley. We're sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt, johnnytshirt.com. And as always, go to InsideCarolina.com, sign up for premium membership. If you haven't already, it's $1 for the first month. It is worth every penny. It could be a lot of pennies if you're with us for years, as Greg Barnes has been. I've been doing this for years. It just keeps getting better. Go to Inside Carolina, sign up. I see daily with Greg Barnes and Tommy Ashley here, the new show. Greg, and what better way to break out a new name than break out the 1-year anniversary of Bill Belichick at UNC? I can honestly say time flies. It seems like yesterday we were at the Blue Zone for the Belichick introductory press conference with a bunch of IC members and everybody else in the sports world. What a day that was.
Has there been a year that you can remember, and I'm probably setting myself up for failure with this, in the sports world, at least in the North Carolina sports world, where it wasn't the first half, it was probably the first 8 months were euphoric and had so much potential and so much excitement and kind of reached the peak Labor Day weekend and then just fell off a cliff? Can you remember anything like this?
It's like that roller coaster where you're going up to the edge and you can see everything, and it's just an amazing view, and the floor drops. Maybe
Right.
the Tower of Terror at Hollywood Studios in Florida. But yeah, at about 8:20, 8:25, 8:30 on September 1st, prime. It was absolute. It could not get any better. There were tears in Kenan Stadium stands from longtime football people thinking, this is it. They have reached the pinnacle, Greg. And here we are, a year later.
Whew. Yeah, it's been a ride. No doubt about it. I think the roller coaster analogy is really good. And it's just a slow climb up from here. But I really think, if we go back to the beginning, the key point that we were trying to make when Belichick was hired was, number one, yes, he's this huge name. Yes, he's won 8 Super Bowls. He's won 6 as a head coach with the Patriots. All of that was a significant development for North Carolina. But there was also an understanding that he was in his 70s, and that is not as though he was going to be in Chapel Hill for a decade or more. I don't think anybody thought that. I'm sure there are maybe a handful of very optimistic people, but nobody really expected that type of tenure. And so it was really more about, there's this internal struggle of, okay, well, we're going to pay our next head coach $5 million like we paid Mac Brown. And there's a couple guys that we can probably get with that. And we're just going to keep churning out kind of the same product that we have. And maybe we get lucky and maybe somebody has the magic wand. And then, of course, you had another group that wanted to dream more than that and say, hey, we need to roll the dice and try to see if we can make something happen. And so, not that being conservative, there's anything wrong with that. Just like with being aggressive, there's nothing wrong with that. There has to be a fight there, right? A kind of a pull, both well-intentioned, and the more aggressive side kind of won out. And there was such a big investment for North Carolina to take that step that it had never taken before in football. And that was a big deal. That remains a big deal. And, that was a big talking point that we had throughout the offseason. But, of course, the Belichick name was what really drove the national media and drove a lot of the conversations. And I think the frustrating thing for skeptics, whether that was, there's a handful in the fan base, but a lot in rival fan bases, maybe some jealousy just with the attention Carolina was getting, and then with the national media, as always is the case, that there was nothing but sunshine and roses for much of the offseason for Bill Belichick and UNC. Like this opportunity and everything was going to be great. It was going to be rosy and exciting. And so as soon as there was any hint of issue, which we saw after about 8 minutes of the TCU game, it was red meat and ripe for the picking. And we saw that very rapidly, very intensely. And I think there was some embarrassment for North Carolina faithful for obvious reasons. And so this has been a process. And I think more than anything, what we learned is that Belichick, we knew he'd never stepped foot in the college game before, and it was evident, right? Once we got into that TCU game, that yes, he's a great football mind, but there's a lot of difference in between the college game and the pro game. And granted, we've seen that with Nick Saban. We saw it with Steve Spurrier. There's been a number of coaches that were very good in one field or the other who could not make that jump. It remains to be seen if Belichick can, but we know that the first year was not what anybody hoped for.
Yeah, it was I said it right out of the top. I can't believe it's been a year. I mean, it was literally 1 year ago today. If you're watching this on Thursday, December the 11th, we were sitting in the blue zone and Bill Belichick walks out and there's a placard on the thing and it says, Bill Belichick, head coach. Surreal moment. And then reality hit when the game started. And Greg, this is one thing I want to go back to because we had this conversation, you, me, and Jason Staples about the Belichick factor in coaching as far as rivalry games and things like that. And you, if my memory serves, were on the side of rivalry games are different. These people take it seriously, NC State, Duke, whoever. It was going to be a tough road to hoe for Belichick to understand that on the college level. I think Staples said, conversely, look how he's done in the Patriots rivals or whatever. And we saw how it played out. But it wasn't just rivalry games this year, Greg. It was every game that North Carolina was there, and people wanted a piece of North Carolina, even more so than normal because of Belichick. I think that was surprising maybe to the coaching staff, to the administration, how badly not only people wanted to beat North Carolina, but to quote some other coaches, pardon my French, wanted to beat their ass and beat his ass. And I think that was a big part of the learning curve, or needs to be a big part of the learning curve going forward, because it's still there for sure.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great point, Tommy. Whenever you have a guy that's kind of been lifted up as arguably the greatest football coach of all time, you know, that's the feather in your cap if you can get it done. And when is the best time to do that? In year one, when he's learning on the job. And so I think you're exactly right that every team Carolina faced looked at that as an opportunity. No doubt the rivals did. I mean, Jake Dickert at Wake Forest, we saw kind of how he ended the game. Manny Diaz has a good understanding of that Duke Carolina rivalry. He's been around the ACC for a long time. And then, of course, we know how Dave Doran is, and anything that State can do to claim victory over North Carolina, they're going to jump at it and celebrate it for as long as they can, which is understandable. And so that clearly is going to be something moving forward that they have to be aware of. And I do think it's a matter of making sure you're schemed up better. One of the things that was probably most surprising for me this year is we knew coming in that this team was not very talented. It proved to be less talented than maybe we thought. But when you don't have that level of talent to compete with the big boys, you've got to be very sharp in your scheme. You've got to find an advantage. We talked about Larry Fedora for a long time, and Buck Sanders always talked about this. You can't just run out your typical college offense and expect to play with the big boys. You have to get creative. And Larry Fedora's offense, the Fed spread, was very creative. It was different and very successful there for a number of years until it kind of went mainstream. So you got to take that approach. And Belichick didn't really do that. They just kind of did what your normal teams do on both sides of the ball. And if you don't have the talent to be able to do it, good luck. And so I think that's a big part of this offseason. Yeah, you got to get the talent to be better for sure. But if your talent level is not at the same tier as maybe one of these CFP teams, at least top 20, maybe Notre Dame, I think it's an opportunity to say we need to scheme up a little bit differently. We need to find a unique advantage. We've got all this experience at the NFL. Let's do something a little bit different. Let's throw them off their game a little bit, because to your point, a lot of teams did that to North Carolina and showed them things they maybe hadn't seen in any of the games previously.
Yeah, that was the biggest thing for me, and the biggest disappointment is all the things we said North Carolina would do, um, they didn't. They didn't really do it all year. Just for folks listening to this, Greg will join me, Jason Staples, and Don Callahan tonight, Thursday night, around 9. We'll figure out the exact time, 9:30, maybe 10 o'clock, and do a sort of a 1-year anniversary program where we expound on these topics more. But for today and for IC Daily, we're just hitting on them a little bit. Like I said, join us tonight. We'll get deep into the weeds about this. But Greg, when you look at this first year, we can talk about the negatives on the football field, on the actual football field, on the school board. Nobody expected 4-8. Nobody wanted 4-8. I certainly didn't see it, and the schedule's brutally bad. Figured, 8-4 at worst. But here we are at 4-8. But what were the positives that's come out with this? You've hit on it for a lot, and that's the investment. And people need to understand that the investment is real and has been real. The question everybody has is, will it continue? But your topics and articles and columns that you've done, if anything positive has come out of this past year, is that North Carolina appears to be all in on the financial aspect of this game that has gone nuts with money of late.
Yeah, so it was a risk reward hire for sure. And it's showing to be that risky part of the equation that nobody wanted. But I think the important thing for fans to understand is that there's a desire to just automatically say, hey, he made $10 million this year, and look what he provided. It's a fair point. It's a legitimate point. It's also a sunk cost. When you take that risk and you bring in somebody who's never done it before at the college level, and yes, he should have been better prepared. He should have more people on his staff who had done it. All these things are valid criticisms, no doubt. But there was always the chance that it was going to be like this. And everybody hoped that it wouldn't and that it would be perfect. But that's just not how it played out. And so instead of saying, they just blew all this money, you just kind of have to chalk it up to a learning experience and grin and bear it. And it's not something anybody wants to do, but you can live with that if things get better quickly. If things don't, right, then this is kind of a wasted experiment. And that's a problem, I think, if that happens, because then you're going to have a lot of people who donated money saying, look, we went all in and we tried to make this happen, and it was worse than it had been, which is a legitimate complaint. So best case scenario for North Carolina is that Belichick's able to figure this out, at least gets the program on an upward trajectory, so they're no longer trying to vie for a bowl game, that they're actually kind of somewhat in the conversation for the ACC championship game. And then if you do that, of course, you're in the conversation for the CFP. A long way to go to get to that point. But I think it's best to say, look, there's a lot of money invested this first year. Unfortunately, it's got to be a foundational year, and it's got to be a launch pad for much better things to come. And that needs to be the mindset. And I think that's how the mindset is for Lee Roberts and the other athletic administrators that kind of running the show here. You need to see a turnaround quickly, but you hope that there's a lot of things that were learned by Belichick and his staff this year that they can make sure it doesn't happen again, and that they can learn from and be better at next year and moving forward.
One thing about it is we'll be on top of it. Inside Carolina will be on top of it. The national media will be on top of it. Everybody loves a teardown story. Everybody loves a comeback story. So we'll see if Carolina can get it done. Like I said, join us tonight live. I'll have it posted on the message boards. We get together and we talk more in depth about this stuff. But that's going to do it for today's IC Daily, the new show, the new name, Daily Greg Barnes information, me just setting it on the tee, and you guys listening and paying attention. Shout out to Johnny T-Shirt, johnnytshirt.com. And like I said, sign up at InsideCarolina.com for your new On3 Network Inside Carolina Premium membership and get all the benefits of Johnny T-Shirt and all the benefits of Greg Barnes and everybody else's work at Inside Carolina. Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Tommy.